You think you know what fear is. You think it's the jump scare in a movie, the ghost story told around a campfire, the fleeting shadow you see in the corner of your eye when you're home alone. You're wrong. Fear isn't a story someone else tells you. It's a story you live, one that's carved into your memory with a cold, sharp blade. It's the sound of your mother's voice calling for help from the other side of a locked door. When you absolutely know, your mother is 1,000 miles away on vacation. Fear is the chilling realization that whatever is mimicking her voice is patient, and it's learning. It's the silence that follows when it knows you know, and the soft, deliberate scrape of a nail dragging down the outside of that door. I used to love horror stories. Now I'm the one telling them, but the difference is, mine is true, and it's not over yet. The thing that came to my parents' house while I was watching it, the thing that wore my mother's voice like a coat, it's still out there. And sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and the world is asleep, I hear a sound on the wind. It's faint, barely there, but I know it. It's the sound of my own voice, whispering my name from the darkness. It's been 6 months since I agreed to be a fire lookout for the summer. 6 months since I've seen another human face that wasn't grainy and pixelated on a video call. My post, the Oakhaven Tower, is a 100-foot-tall metal skeleton with a tiny glass box on top, planted in the middle of 1,000,000 acres of unforgiving Montana wilderness. The nearest town is a 2-hour drive down a road that's more of a suggestion than a reality. For the first few months, it was paradise. The solitude was a balm. I watched sunrises paint the sky in hues I never knew existed. I saw thunderstorms roll across the valleys like angry gods. And I read more books than I did in 4 years of college. The only sounds were the wind whistling through the steel struts of the tower, the cry of a distant hawk, and the crackle of my radio during the twice-daily check-ins. My world was the sky, the trees, and the profound, beautiful silence. The silence was the first thing to change. It started subtly. I'd be sitting at my desk, mapping weather patterns, and I'd hear a noise, a faint, musical clinking. I'd scan the horizon, check my equipment, and find nothing. It happened a few times a day, a random phantom chime. I wrote it off as the wind playing tricks on the tower's guide wires. Then one afternoon, I was outside on the catwalk cleaning the windows when I saw it. Hanging from the branch of a gnarled pine about 50 yards from the base of the tower was a wind chime. That was impossible. I was the only person for miles, and I sure as hell didn't hang it there. I grabbed my binoculars. The chimes weren't metal or bamboo. They were long and pale, almost white. They were bones. Small bones, maybe from a coyote or a deer, strung together with what looked like sinew. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. This wasn't a prank. The effort it would have taken for someone to get out here, unnoticed, just to hang a macabre wind chime was staggering. That night I couldn't sleep. The gentle, almost pleasant clinking had turned sinister. Every time a gust of wind blew, the bones would sing their little song, a lullaby of death just outside my sanctuary. I started keeping the windows closed. A week later, the shadows started to move wrong. As a fire lookout, you become an expert on light and shadow. You know how they stretch and shrink with the passing of the day, how they dance and flicker with the wind in the trees. You know their shapes, their rhythms. But one evening, as the sun bled out behind the western peaks, I noticed a shadow that didn't belong. It was cast by a large cluster of pines, but it was too tall, too thin. It stood motionless while the other shadows around it swayed with the breeze. I watched it through my binoculars until the last light failed, and the shape remained, a pillar of pure blackness against the deepening twilight. I told myself it was an optical illusion, a trick of the fading light. But I saw it again the next night, and the night after that. Sometimes it would be in a different spot, cast by a different set of trees. But it was always the same. Unnaturally tall, unnaturally still, and shaped vaguely, horribly, like a man. The fear started to ferment inside me. The beautiful silence I had cherished was now a suffocating blanket of dread. I found myself talking to myself constantly, just to break the quiet. I'd leave the radio on, listening to static for hours, just for the semblance of another presence. The daily check-ins with dispatch became my lifeline. I'd try to keep the operator, a friendly woman named Sarah, on the line for as long as I could, asking stupid questions about the weather, making bad jokes. I never told her about the chimes or the shadow. How could I? They'd think I had cabin fever. They'd pull me out and my career would be over. The whispers began in the 3rd month. At first, it was just a sigh on the wind, so faint I could dismiss it. But it grew. Soon I could hear distinct words, spoken in a dry, rasping hiss. It wasn't in English, or any language I recognized. It was guttural, ancient. The voice would slither through the cracks in the window frames, coil around me in the dark. It never shouted, it just whispered, a constant, insidious stream of alien syllables that made the hairs on my arms stand up. The Shadow Man, as I started calling him, became bolder. It would appear in the middle of the day, a stark black figure standing at the edge of the clearing below my tower. It never moved, it just watched. I would spend hours with my binoculars trained on it, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. It had no face, no features, but I could feel its gaze on me, a heavy, malevolent pressure. I stopped going down from the tower. I had enough supplies to last the season, and the outhouse at the base might as well have been on the moon. The thought of being on the ground, vulnerable with that thing out there, was paralyzing. My world shrank to the 15 by 15 foot cage of the lookout cab. The breaking point came last Tuesday. A thick fog had rolled in overnight, blanketing the entire forest. Visibility was zero. I couldn't even see the ground below the tower. It felt like I was floating in a sea of white. The bone chimes were silent. The wind was still. The oppressive quiet was absolute. Around noon, my radio crackled to life. It wasn't my scheduled check-in time. "Oakhaven Tower, this is dispatch, you read?" It was Sarah's voice, but it sounded off, flat, emotionless. "Loud and clear, Sarah. What's up?" I replied, a wave of relief washing over me at the sound of another human voice. "We're getting reports of a small plume of smoke in your sector, Oakhaven. Can you confirm visual?" My blood ran cold. "Negative, dispatch. Visibility is zero. I'm completely fogged in." There was a long pause. The static on the radio hissed. Then Sarah's voice came back, still unnervingly flat. "Just take a look, will you? Step outside on the catwalk. It might be below the fog line." "Sarah, I'm telling you, I can't see anything. It's a wall of white." "Just step outside, Oakhaven," she repeated. "Just take a look." The voice was wrong. It was Sarah's, but there was no inflection, no warmth. It was a recording. A mimic. My hand trembled as I held the radio. "Who is this?" I whispered. The radio was silent for a moment. Then a new sound came through. It was the faint, musical clinking of the bone chimes, and underneath it, the dry, rasping whisper curling out of the speaker. I threw the radio across the cab. It shattered against the far wall. I was alone. Truly alone. And whatever was out there was trying to lure me outside. I scrambled to the windows, peering down into the impenetrable fog. I saw nothing, but I could hear it. A scraping sound. It was coming from below me. From the tower itself, slowly, deliberately. Something was climbing the metal stairs. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. Pause. It was methodical. Patient. The sound echoed up the metal frame, vibrating through the floor into the soles of my feet. My mind went blank with terror. I looked around my tiny glass prison for a weapon. A flare gun. I grabbed it, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it. Scrape. Scrape. It was halfway up. I could hear a low, guttural breathing now. A wet, ragged sound. I backed into the corner of the cab, aiming the flare gun at the trap door that led down to the stairs. The scraping stopped. It was right below me. The silence stretched for an eternity. My own breathing sounded like a hurricane in my ears. Then a single, sharp tap on the underside of the trap door. I flinched. Another tap. Then another. It was testing it. A low chuckle echoed from below, a sound like rocks grinding together. And then a voice. Not a whisper this time, but a clear, articulate voice. Spoke from right beneath my feet. It was my own voice. "Let me in," it said. "It's so cold out here." I started screaming then, a raw, mindless sound of pure terror. The tapping turned into a furious pounding. The trapdoor buckled upwards. Wood splintered. I aimed the flare gun, my finger white on the trigger. The door burst open, and a long, pale, multi-jointed arm, thin as a branch and ending in dirty, talon-like fingers, snaked into the cab. I fired. The flare ignited with a deafening roar, filling the small space with blinding red light and thick, acrid smoke. The arm shrieked, a high-pitched, inhuman sound that pierced my eardrums, and recoiled back down the hole. I didn't wait. Blinded by the flare, choking on the smoke, I scrambled for the emergency rappel rope. I secured it to the anchor point, threw the bag out the window, and went after it. not caring about the fog, the height, or what might be waiting below. I just had to get out of that box. I'm writing this from a ranger station 50 miles away. I ran for 2 days, fueled by adrenaline and terror, navigating by instinct. I haven't slept. They think I'm crazy. Suffering from extreme stress and isolation-induced psychosis. They're sending a team to Oakhaven Tower to retrieve my things and investigate. I tried to warn them. I told them not to go. But they just gave me pitying looks and sedatives. They don't understand. You can't fight a thing that wears the silence like a cloak. A thing that learns your voice and wants to lure you out into the fog. It's been up in those hills for a long, long time. And it's very, very patient. They call them hollows, in the forgotten corners of West Virginia. The places where coal mines once breathed life into a town and then, when the veins ran dry, died and left a corpse. The Black Creek mining complex was one such corpse. It had been abandoned for 50 years, a sprawling wound of decaying headframes, collapsed tunnels, and rusting ore carts being slowly reclaimed by the kudzu and pine. For my crew, myself, Liam, Chloe, and Ben, it was the holy grail of urban exploration. We'd spent weeks researching it, poring over old maps and newspaper clippings. The official story was that the mine was closed in the 70s due to geological instability and a catastrophic flood. But the rumors, the whispers we found on obscure forums, and in the ramblings of old-timers in nearby towns, told a different story. They spoke of disappearances, of a rescue team that went in and never came out, of strange noises echoing from the deep shafts long after the mine was sealed. The main entrance was a gaping maw in the side of a hill, sealed with a cinder block wall that had been crudely erected decades ago. A section had crumbled away, leaving a hole just big enough for a person to squeeze through. "Ladies first," Ben said with a grin, gesturing at Chloe. She rolled her eyes, switched on her headlamp, and wriggled into the darkness. We followed one by one, the cool, damp air of the mine washing over us, a stark contrast to the humid summer day. The air tasted of wet stone, decay, and something else. Something metallic and faintly sour like old blood. The main tunnel was shored up with thick wooden beams, slick with moisture, and blooming with pale, alien-looking fungi. Our headlamps cut sharp cones of light through the absolute blackness, revealing abandoned tools, a petrified leather glove, and the endless, repeating geometry of the tunnel stretching ahead. Okay, according to the maps, the foreman's office should be about 200 yards in, off a side shaft to the left, Liam said, his voice sounding small and tight in the oppressive space. We found it easily enough. The door had rotted off its hinges. Inside, the place was a wreck. A metal desk was overturned. Papers were scattered everywhere, turned to a moldy pulp by the damp. But in the corner, a large metal footlocker had survived, rusted but intact. Ben pried it open with a crowbar. Inside, nestled amongst more moldy papers, was a thick leather-bound logbook. Chloe carefully lifted it out. "The foreman's log," she breathed, her voice filled with reverence. We huddled around as she opened it. The first several pages were mundane entries about tonnage, equipment maintenance, and payroll disputes. But then the entries started to change. October 12th, 1972, blasted through to a new chamber at the 800-foot level. Struck something unexpected. Not coal, a cavity, a massive one. The air coming out of it, it smells wrong, like a butcher's shop left in the sun. The men are spooked. October 14th, 1972, sent a survey team into the cavity. It's a natural cavern, bigger than anything we've ever seen. Walls are covered in some kind of crystalline growth that glows faintly after you hit it with a light. Geologists are baffled. Weirder still, the men who went in said they heard something. A clicking sound, like a million insects. They couldn't find the source. October 17th, 1972. Thompson had a breakdown today, screaming that the rocks were whispering to him. Had to sedate him and send him topside. The other men are on edge. Morale is shot. The clicking is louder now. You can hear it from the main tunnel if you listen close. Some are refusing to work the 800-foot level. The final entry was scrawled in a frantic, barely legible hand. October 19th, 1972, God help us. It came out. It's not rock. It's not animal. It moves in the dark. It folds itself up. It can fit through any crack. We sealed the tunnel, but it's no good. It's in the walls. It's in the dark. Don't open this mine. For the love of God, don't. The entry ended there, the pen having torn through the page. A collective chill went through us. "This is intense," Ben whispered, breaking the silence. It's just a story, man, Liam said, though his voice lacked conviction. Foreman probably went crazy from the isolation. It came out, Chloe read again, her voice a bare whisper. It folds itself up. As if on cue, from deep within the mine we heard a sound. A soft, wet, clicking sound. It was distant, but unmistakable. It sounded like 1,000 fingernails tapping on wet stone. We all froze. Our headlamps pointed down the dark maw of the main tunnel. The clicking grew louder, closer. It was being joined by another sound, a slithering, dragging noise. Something was coming. We need to go, I said, my voice hoarse. Now. We scrambled out of the office, back into the main tunnel. The clicking was echoing all around us now, seeming to come from the very walls. The air grew thick, and the sour, metallic smell intensified until it was a physical presence, coating the back of my throat. We started running, our heavy boots splashing in the puddles of stagnant water. The beams of our headlamps bounced wildly, creating a chaotic strobe effect of dark and light. The dragging sound was closer now, right behind us. I risked a glance over my shoulder, and I saw it. It was pale, the color of bone and slick with moisture. It had no discernible shape, more a chaotic assembly of limbs than a body. It had too many joints bending at impossible angles. It flowed more than it ran, pouring itself through the tunnel, its body contorting to fit the space. Long, thin limbs would shoot out, anchoring themselves to the walls or ceiling with sharp, chitinous claws, pulling the rest of its grotesque mass forward. It had no face, no eyes, just a dark, gaping hole in its center that seemed to pulse in time with the horrific clicking. Liam screamed, a high, thin sound of pure panic. He stumbled and fell. Ben and I turned, grabbing his arms to haul him up. Don't stop, Chloe yelled from ahead. The creature was almost on us. It unfolded, its true size revealed. It was huge, its limbs stretching from floor to ceiling. The central maw opened wider, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. We dragged Liam to his feet and ran, not daring to look back. The sounds of its pursuit were deafening, a symphony of clicking, tearing, and wet, slapping noises. The entrance was just ahead, a small square of gray daylight in the oppressive blackness. We were almost there. Suddenly, Chloe screamed from in front of us. She had stopped, her headlamp pointed at the crumbling wall that sealed the entrance. The hole we had crawled through was gone. It was blocked by a fresh section of cinder blocks, mortared neatly into place. It was impossible. We were trapped. The creature behind us slowed its advance, the clicking softening. It knew. It had us. A low, guttural noise rumbled from its central orifice, a sound that might have been a laugh. It started to ooze toward us, taking its time. Ben lost it. He charged the wall, screaming, slamming his shoulder against the fresh cinder blocks. It didn't budge. He started clawing at it, his fingers bloodying on the rough surface. From the darkness above us, a piece of the ceiling detached. It wasn't rock. It was a limb, pale and thin, unfolding silently. Another one dropped down next to it. It had been above us the whole time. It had herded us into this dead end. The one in the tunnel stopped. The ones from the ceiling descended, their multi-jointed legs moving with a sickening, insect-like grace. We were surrounded. Liam was sobbing openly. Chloe had a strange, resigned look on her face. I backed away until my back hit the cold, damp wall. The creature in the tunnel began to fold itself, its body compressing, its bones audibly cracking and resetting as it made itself smaller, more compact. The ones from the ceiling did the same. They were getting ready to attack. This is it, I thought. This is how it ends. My headlamp flickered. The batteries were dying. The cone of light shrank, the darkness pressing in. In the fading light, I saw the gaping maw of the nearest creature open. The clicking reached a fever pitch, and then my light went out, plunging me into absolute suffocating darkness. The last thing I heard was Ben's scream, abruptly cut short, followed by a sound I will hear in my nightmares for the rest of my life, however short that may be. A sound like a melon being cracked open, followed by a chorus of wet, eager, feeding sounds. The old US Route 77 is a ghost. It was bypassed by the interstate 40 years ago, and now it's just a cracked ribbon of asphalt, winding through the densest parts of the Appalachian woods in southern Ohio. People say you shouldn't drive it at night, that the road belongs to things other than cars once the sun goes down. My girlfriend Maya and I thought that was just local superstition, spooky folklore to tell the tourists. We were wrong. Our van, a vintage VW Westphalia we'd lovingly restored, chose the loneliest stretch of Route 77 to die. One moment we were singing along to the radio, the next there was a loud bang, a plume of smoke, and we were coasting to a silent, dead stop. No cell service, of course. We were stranded. We sat there for an hour as the sun set, the forest growing darker and more menacing around us. The trees were so thick they blotted out the sky, and the silence was unnerving, broken only by the chirping of crickets. Just when we were about to resign ourselves to a terrifying night in the van, we saw a light. A single flickering yellow bulb in the distance, just around a bend in the road. Hope surged through us. We grabbed our backpacks, locked up the van, and started walking. The light belonged to a motel. The sign above it was mostly rusted out, but you could still make out the words, "The Pines Motel. Vacancy." It was a classic. Single-story motor court, a U-shaped building of maybe a dozen rooms facing a gravel parking lot. Only one light was on, the one in the office. The place looked like it hadn't seen a guest since the interstate was built. A small, withered man with pale, almost translucent skin and watery gray eyes greeted us from behind the counter. He moved with a slow, stiff gait, like his joints hurt. "Got a room?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Always," he said, his voice a dry rustle like dead leaves. "Engine trouble?" He didn't smile, just stared at us with those washed-out eyes. "Yeah, something like that. We just need a place to stay the night. We'll call a tow truck in the morning." He pushed a registration card and a tarnished brass key across the counter. "Room 7. End of the line. Cash only." We paid him, the worn dollar bills looking unnaturally bright in the dim, dusty office. As we turned to leave, he said, "Don't mind the noise. Got some long-term guests? They're a rowdy bunch." We found room 7 at the far end of the U, next to a door that was boarded up. The room was clean, surprisingly so, but sparse. 2 beds, a small table, and a bathroom with a flickering fluorescent light. It smelled of bleach and damp earth. We were exhausted and emotionally drained, so we collapsed onto the beds. That's when we heard the first sound from the next room over, room 6. It was a scratching. A frantic, rhythmic scratching on the wall that separated our rooms. "Probably a raccoon in the walls," I said, trying to reassure Maya, and maybe myself. But the scratching was too deliberate, too rhythmic. It sounded like someone was trying to claw their way through the drywall. Then came a different sound, from the other side, from outside. A low, wet cough followed by a series of clicks. I went to the window and peeked through the dusty blinds. In the faint light from the office, I could see a figure standing in the parking lot, staring at our door. It was tall and unnaturally thin, its limbs long and spidery. Its skin was as pale as the night manager's. It just stood there, its head cocked at an odd angle. The scratching in room 6 stopped. A moment later, we heard the door of that room creak open. I watched, my heart in my throat, as another pale figure emerged from room 6. It moved with a jerky, disjointed gait, its arms hanging too low, its fingers nearly scraping the gravel. It joined the first figure in the parking lot. They didn't speak, just stood there, watching our door. A third figure emerged from room 5, then a fourth from room 3. Soon there were 8 of them standing in the gravel lot, a silent, pale congregation, all staring at our door. They weren't rowdy. They were waiting. "We have to get out of here," Maya whispered, her voice trembling. "The window." We went to the bathroom window. It was small, but big enough to climb through. It opened out to the back of the motel, facing the dark, impenetrable woods. I pushed the screen out and hoisted myself up. I dropped to the soft earth outside, then turned to help Maya. We didn't make a sound. We crouched below the window, listening. We could hear them now, moving around to the front of the motel. A soft, shuffling sound on the gravel, and the clicking, a chorus of soft, wet clicks. We ran. We plunged into the woods, the darkness swallowing us whole. Branches whipped at our faces, thorns tore at our clothes. Behind us, we heard a shriek, a horrible, high-pitched sound that was not human. It was answered by others, a cacophony of inhuman calls echoing through the forest. They were after us. The chase was a nightmare blur. We could hear them crashing through the undergrowth behind us, moving with an unnatural speed. They were fast. Faster than us. We could hear their strange, clicking language all around us, coordinating, cutting off our path. We ran until our lungs burned and our legs were jelly. We burst out of the woods and found ourselves back on the road, Route 77. We had run in a circle. In the middle of the road, bathed in the moonlight, stood the night manager, He was holding an old-fashioned kerosene lantern. He wasn't alone. The pale things were with him, emerging from the trees on both sides of the road, blocking our escape. They were crawlers, just like in the stories. Their skin was stretched tight over their bones. Their eyes were large, black, and devoid of any light. Their mouths were wide, lipless slits filled with small, sharp teeth. "Lost?" the manager asked, his dry leaf voice filled with a chilling amusement. Most folks who check into the pines, they never check out. The crawlers began to close in, their long, pale fingers twitching, their black eyes fixed on us. They shuffled forward, their joints popping and clicking with every unnatural step. We were trapped. There was nowhere to run. I grabbed Maya's hand. If this was it, we were going to face it together. Just as the first crawler lunged, its claws extended, a pair of brilliant white lights flooded the road, and the roar of a diesel engine filled the night. A massive semi-truck, one that had no business being on this forgotten road, came barreling around the corner. It didn't slow down. The driver must have seen the scene, the pale monstrosities in the road, and made a split-second decision. The truck plowed through the crawlers without even tapping the brakes. There were sickening thuds, the screech of things being dragged under the wheels. The truck swerved, its horn blaring a deafening blast, and kept going, disappearing down the dark road, leaving a wake of silence and carnage. We stood there shaking, surrounded by the mangled, broken bodies of the crawlers. They bled a thick, black, tar-like substance that smoked where it touched the asphalt. The night manager was gone, vanished. We didn't wait around. We ran down the road, away from the motel, away from what we had just seen. We ran until the sun came up, and we finally stumbled into a town where the sound of a tow truck was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. We never told anyone the full story. We just said we got lost in the woods after our van broke down. Who would believe us? But I know what I saw. I know there are places, forgotten roads, and derelict motels that are traps. They are hunting grounds for things that hunger for us. Things that wear a human-like shape but are anything but. And they have someone who checks in their guests. Someone who makes sure the prey is delivered. The vacancy sign is always on, and they're always waiting. If you've made it this far, you understand that the world is bigger and stranger than you've been told. The shadows have teeth, and the silence has a voice. These stories are a warning. If you have your own encounter, your own story of surviving the dark, share it in the comments below. Reading them, knowing we're not alone, it helps. And it reminds us to keep a light on, to check the locks, and to never, ever trust a voice that sounds familiar but feels wrong. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. You don't want to be left alone in the dark when the next story comes out. Stay safe out there.